Chapter 1. The departure from Vienna *. The platform at Vienna's West Bahnhof buzzed with the restless energy of departure. Porters in crisp uniforms darted through the crowd, their trolleys laden with leather trunks and hat boxes, while the air carried the sharp tang of coal smoke and the faint perfume of departing ladies. The Danube Express, its sleek blue and gold carriages gleaming under the autumn sun, stood ready to embark on its journey to Istanbul, a ribbon of luxury winding through the heart of Europe. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, adjusted his Homburg hat and surveyed the scene with keen, bird-like eyes. His waxed mustache twitched slightly as he noted the passengers, a kaleidoscope of wealth, ambition, and secrets. "Mon ami," he murmured to himself, "the human heart, it is a puzzle more intricate than any locked room, and this train, I suspect, will be a stage for its drama." He stepped aboard, his cane tapping lightly on the polished wood of the carriage floor. The conductor, a wiry man with a deferential bow, ushered him to his first-class compartment, its mahogany panels and velvet curtains exuding understated opulence. Poirot settled into his seat, his small suitcase neatly stowed, and opened a copy of Le Figaro, though his attention remained on his fellow travelers. In the corridor, a woman's voice, sharp and imperious, cut through the hum of conversation. "My jewels, Heinrich, must be locked in the safe at once. I will not have them jostled about like common luggage." Poirot's gaze flicked up. The speaker was Baroness Ilse von Adler, a statuesque woman in her 50s, her fur stole draped like a royal mantle. Her companion, a nervous young man presumably. Her secretary scurried to obey, clutching a velvet case. Across the platform, a younger woman, her auburn hair pinned beneath a cloached hat, lingered near the carriage door. She glanced about, her fingers tightening on a leather satchel. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mademoiselle is anxious," he noted, "not for the journey, Nan, but for something or someone she expects to meet." The whistle blew, a shrill command, and the train shuddered into motion. Poirot's compartment door slid open, admitting a man in a well-cut suit, his dark hair slicked back, a cigarette case glinting in his hand. "Monsieur Poirot, is it not?" he said, his accent faintly Eastern European. "Janos Kovacs, diplomat, a pleasure to share this journey with so renowned a detective." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but guarded. "Monsieur Kovacs, the pleasure is mine. You traveled to Istanbul on affairs of state, perhaps?" Kovacs's laugh was smooth, practiced. "Merely a holiday, monsieur. Even diplomats must rest." His eyes, however, darted to the corridor, where the auburn-haired woman had vanished. As the train gathered speed, the dining car beckoned. Poirot rose, smoothing his waistcoat. "The little grey cells, they require nourishment," he mused, "and the dining car, it is the perfect place to observe the players in this little drama." The car was a vision of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white linen tablecloths, and the clink of silverware mingled with the murmur of conversation. Poirot took a seat near the center, his position ideal for observation. At one table, Baroness von Adler held court, her laughter brittle as she addressed a silver-haired Englishman, Colonel Arbuthnot, whose military bearing suggested a man accustomed to command. At another, the auburn-haired woman, introduced as Miss Clara Wren, a concert pianist, sipped her wine, her eyes flitting nervously to the door. A young American couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, chatted animatedly about their European tours, while a quiet, bespectacled man, Dr. Lucas Schmidt, a German archaeologist, read a book, his fork pausing mid-air as if lost in thought. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, cataloguing gestures, glances, the unspoken tensions that hung like mist. "In the air, Monsieur Poirot," said a voice at his elbow. It was the conductor, his face pale. "A small matter, but one of the passengers has reported a missing item. A letter, they say, of great importance." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A letter, you say? And who is this passenger?" The conductor hesitated. "Miss Wren, monsieur. She is most distressed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Distressed? But perhaps, not only for a letter. Merci, monsieur. I shall consider this." As the train sped through the darkening countryside, the lights of Vienna fading behind, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The Danube Express, he sensed, was more than a journey. It was a stage, and the curtain had just risen on a mystery that would demand all his ingenuity. One chapter done, and the mystery has only just begun. Tell me, dear listener, where in the world are you joining us from? Leave your city below, and subscribe now, because the next chapter may hold the first real clue. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Dining Car, *. The dining car of the Danube Express was a symphony of elegance, its polished mahogany tables reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, the clink of fine porcelain, and the murmur of cultured voices, mingled with the rhythmic clatter of the train as it carved its way through the Austrian countryside. Now cloaked in twilight, Hercule Poirot, seated at a table strategically positioned to command a view of the entire car, sipped his sharp eyes darting from one passenger to another. The dining car, he mused to himself. It is the theatre of human nature, where masks are worn, but not always securely. The passengers, dressed in evening finery, presented a tableau of wealth and refinement, yet Poirot sensed undercurrents of unease. At the table nearest the window, Baroness Ilse von Adler presided like a queen, her silver hair swept into an elaborate chignon, her emerald necklace catching the light. Her voice, rich with Viennese hauteur, carried over the hum of conversation. "My dear Colonel Arbuthnot," she said, addressing the silver-haired Englishman opposite her, "you must tell me more of your campaigns in India. Surely a man of your experience has stories to rival Scheherazade." Colonel Arbuthnot, his posture ramrod straight, gave a tight smile. "Hardly, Baroness. My tales are of dust and duty, not romance, though I dare say you've seen your share of intrigue in the courts of Europe." His tone was polite, but his eyes, steely and assessing, suggested a man who trusted little and revealed less. Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Clara Wren, the auburn-haired pianist, seated alone at a small table. Her delicate fingers toyed with the stem of her wineglass, her eyes darting to the door, as if expecting an unwelcome arrival. The conductor's earlier mention of her missing letter intrigued Poirot. "A letter of importance," he murmured. "But what importance, I wonder? A secret, a threat, or perhaps a confession?" At another table, the young American couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, radiated exuberance. Mrs. Thornton, her blonde curls bouncing, laughed too loudly at her husband's jest about their visit to Salzburg. "Oh, Harry, imagine if we'd missed this train. All those castles and operas, and now this divine journey." Her husband, a broad-shouldered man with a boyish grin, nodded enthusiastically, though Poirot noted his frequent glances toward the Baroness's table, as if drawn by her commanding presence. Dr. Lukas Schmidt, the German archaeologist, sat alone, his spectacles glinting as he pored over a tattered notebook, ignoring his plate of coq au vin. His absorption seemed genuine, yet Poirot observed the man's occasional sidelong glances at Miss Wren. Curio, Poirot thought. The scholar is not so detached as he appears. The diplomat, Janos Kovacs, entered late, his sleek appearance and easy charm drawing eyes. He paused at Poirot's table, bowing slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, may I join you for a moment? The solitude of travel can be tiresome." Without waiting for a reply, he slid into the opposite chair, signaling the waiter for a glass of cognac. "Solitude, Monsieur Kovacs," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. "Yet you seem a man who thrives in company. Your work, it takes you too many capitals, Nan." Kovacs's smile was a study in nonchalance. "Budapest, Berlin, Constantinople merely stops on a map. I am but a humble servant of diplomacy, seeking a quiet escape on this journey." His fingers tapped the cigarette case in his pocket, a nervous tick that belied his smooth words. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp clatter. Miss Wren had dropped her fork, her face pale as she stared at a newcomer entering the dining carretou, an angular man with a hawkish face and a limp, introduced by the conductor as Mr. Victor Stoll, a merchant from Prague. His arrival seemed to unsettle several passengers. The Baroness's smile tightened. Colonel Arbuthnot's hand paused on his glass, and Miss Wren's knuckles whitened around her napkin. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most interesting," he thought. "Monsieur Stahl is a catalyst, stirring the pot of secrets." As the meal progressed, snippets of conversation reached Poirot's ears, each a thread in the tapestry of suspicion he was beginning to weave. The Baroness spoke of a recent theft at her Viennese estate, her tone suggesting more anger than loss. "A sapphire brooch," she declared, "irreplaceable, and yet the police were useless." Colonel Arbuthnot murmured something about dishonest servants, but his eyes were on Mr. Stahl, who sat alone, methodically cutting his steak. Mrs. Thornton, emboldened by her second glass of wine, leaned toward Miss Wren's table. "You're the pianist, aren't you? I saw your name in a Paris program last spring. Tell me, do you ever play for royalty?" Miss Wren's reply was soft, almost inaudible. "Once or twice. I prefer smaller audiences." Her eyes flicked to Stoll, then away. Dr. Schmidt roused. From his notebook, addressed Kovacs across the aisle. "You've been to Constantinople, Herr Kovacs. I am bound there to study Byzantine artifacts. The city is a treasure trove, though not without its dangers." Kovacs's laugh was sharp. "Dangers, Dr. Only, if one seeks them out." The meal concluded with a dessert of creme brulee, its caramelized crust cracked with delicate spoons. Poirot declined coffee, preferring to linger, his mind cataloguing every glance, every inflection. As the passengers began to disperse, the conductor approached him again, his face drawn. "Monsieur Poirot, a word, if I may." Miss Wren's distress grows. She insists her letter was in her compartment, locked, yet now it is gone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Locked, you say, and yet the letter is no more. Tell me, monsieur, who has access to the compartments?" "Only the staff, monsieur, and, well, the passengers themselves, of course. But the locks are secure, I assure you." "Secure, perhaps," Poirot said, rising. "But no lock is proof against determination. Merci, I shall speak with Mademoiselle Wren." As he made his way back to his compartment, the train swayed gently, its rhythm a counterpoint to the growing tension. The dining car had revealed much, rivalries, fears, and a web of connections yet to be untangled. Poirot paused at his door, his hand on the handle. "The little grey cells, they are awake," he murmured. "And this journey, it promises to be most illuminating." Chapter 3. The midnight scream. The Danube Express thundered through the night, its wheels singing a relentless lullaby against the tracks. The moon, a pale crescent, cast fleeting silver light through the windows of the first-class carriage, where Hercule Poirot lay in his neatly made berth, his eyes half closed but his mind alert. Sleep, for Poirot, was a luxury subordinate to observation, and the events of the dining car had set his little grey cells humming. "There is a tension here," he murmured, adjusting his silk nightcap, a thread stretched taut, waiting to snap. The train's rhythm was soothing, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of unease, as if the very air held its breath. Poirot's compartment, with its polished wood and crisp linens, was a cocoon of comfort, but he could not shake the sense that the night held secrets. He had just begun to drift into a light doze, when a sound shattered the silence. A scream, high and piercing, slicing through the murmur of the train like a knife. Poirot sat bolt upright, his heart steady, but his senses razor. The scream had come from the corridor, not far from his compartment. He swung his legs over the edge of the berth, slipped into his velvet dressing gown, and seized his cane, its silver handle cool against his palm. Stepping into the corridor, he found it dimly lit, the wall sconces casting long shadows. Other doors were opening, and sleepy, anxious faces peered out. "What in blazes was that?" demanded Colonel Arbuthnot, his military mustache bristling as he emerged in a striped dressing gown, a revolver glinting in his hand. "Sounded like a woman in distress." "Calm yourself, Colonel Poirot," said his voice steady. "We shall ascertain the cause. Haste without method leads only to chaos." His eyes scanned the corridor, noting the Baroness's door ajar, her pale face framed in the doorway, her eyes wide with alarm. "It was her," the Baroness said, pointing a trembling finger toward Miss Clara Wren's compartment. "That pianist girl, I heard it clear as day." Poirot moved swiftly to Miss Wren's door, rapping sharply. "Mademoiselle Wren, it is Hercule Poirot. Are you in need of assistance?" There was no immediate reply, only a faint rustling, like papers being hurriedly gathered. Then the door slid open, revealing Clara Wren, her auburn hair disheveled, her face ashen. She clutched a shawl around her shoulders, her eyes darting past Poirot to the gathering crowd. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a nightmare, nothing more. I didn't mean to alarm anyone." Poirot's gaze was piercing, yet his tone was gentle. "A nightmare, mademoiselle. Most distressing. Yet your scream, it was of such intensity. May I enter, to ensure all is well?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on the shawl, but she stepped aside. Poirot entered the small compartment, his eyes sweeping over the neatly made bed, the open suitcase, and a small writing desk where a single candle flickered. A faint scent lingered in the air, something floral, yet sharp, like crushed lavender, mixed with something less pleasant. Curio, Poirot thought, filing the observation away. Mademoiselle, he said, turning to her, you mentioned to the conductor a missing letter. Might this nightmare be connected to your distress over this loss? Her eyes widened, then narrowed. No, Monsieur Poirot. It was just a dream, nothing more. The letter. It's unimportant now. Her voice wavered, and Poirot noted the tremor in her hands. Before he could press further, Janos Kovacs appeared in the doorway, his silk pajamas impeccably pressed despite the hour. Miss Wren, you've given us all a fright, he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Nightmares can be beastly things. Perhaps a brandy to steady the nerves. No, thank you, Clara snapped, her composure fraying. I just want to be left alone. The conductor, Monsieur Dubois, pushed through the small crowd, his face flushed with embarrassment. Madame E.T., Messieurs, please, return to your compartments, the matter is under control. Mademoiselle Wren is unharmed. Unharmed, oui, Poirot said softly, but not at ease. He stepped back into the corridor, allowing Clara to close her door, though he noted the faint click of a lock being turned. The other passengers dispersed reluctantly, the Baroness muttering about hysterical young women and Colonel Arbuthnot holstering his revolver with a grunt dot as Poirot lingered. Dr. Lucas Schmidt approached, his spectacles slightly askew, a book still clutched in his hand. Monsieur Poirot, he said quietly, I was awake, reading, when I heard the scream. I thought, well, it sounded like more than a nightmare. There was a noise before it, a sort of thud, like something heavy falling. Poirot's mustache twitched. A thud, you say? Most interesting, Doctor. From which direction? Schmidt hesitated, glancing toward Clara's compartment. I couldn't be certain. The sound was muffled, but it came from that end of the carriage. Merci, Dr. Poirot said, his mind racing. Your observation is most valuable. As the corridor emptied, Poirot lingered, his eyes tracing the polished panels and brass fittings. He knelt briefly, examining the carpet near the door, where a faint scuff mark marred the weave. A nightmare, perhaps, he murmured, but nightmares do not leave marks, nor do they carry the scent of fear. He returned to his compartment, but sleep was now far from his thoughts. The scream, the missing letter, the nervous glances in the dining car, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot was determined to fit them together. The train sped on, its rhythm unbroken, but the night had grown heavier, as if the Danube, Express itself, knew that darker events were yet to unfold. Chapter 4. The locked compartment. The Danube Express rolled through the pre-dawn darkness, its wheels a steady heartbeat against the tracks, slicing through the misty forests of Hungary. Hercule Poirot, roused from his restless thoughts by the conductor's urgent knock, stood in his dressing gown, his face calm but his eyes alight with anticipation. The scream of the previous night had set the stage, and now, it seemed, the curtain was rising on a tragedy. Monsieur Poirot, Monsieur Dubois whispered, his voice trembling, you must come at once. There has been an incident in compartment 7. It is most grave. Poirot's moustache twitched. Grave, you say? Lead on, monsieur. The little grey cells, they are ready. He followed the conductor through the dimly lit corridor, where the first-class passengers' doors remained closed, their occupants presumably still asleep. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint, metallic temps of the train's machinery. They stopped before compartment 7. Its door shut tight, the brass number gleaming under the sconce's light. Dubois produced a master key, his hand shaking as he inserted it. The door was locked from the inside, he said. We only discovered, because of the maid's routine check. The lock clicked, and the door slid open. Poirot stepped inside, his cane tapping softly on the floor, and froze. There, slumped against the velvet-holstered bench, was Mr. Victor Stahl, the hawkish merchant from Prague. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, his face frozen in a grimace of shock. A thin trickle of blood ran from a wound at his temple, staining the cushion beneath him. A silver letter opener, its handle engraved with intricate filigree, lay on the floor beside him, its blade dark with blood. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, methodical and unyielding. Mon Dieu, he murmured, a murder, and in a locked compartment. Most intriguing. He knelt, careful not to disturb the scene, and examined Stahl's body. The wound was precise, a single blow, suggesting both strength and intent. The Man's watch stopped at 2:17 a.m. Dangled from his waistcoat, its glass face shattered. Dubois wrung his hands. "Monsieur, what is to be done? We are hours from the next station, and the passengers, they will panic." "Calm yourself, Monsieur Dubois," Poirot said, rising. "Panic serves no purpose. First, we must ensure the scene is preserved. No one enters this compartment without my permission. Second, fetch the ship's doctor. Dr. Schmidt, I believe, has medical training." "Yes, monsieur. He mentioned it at dinner," Dubois said, nodding vigorously. "I will fetch him at once." As the conductor hurried away, Poirot continued his examination. The compartment was small but luxurious, with a folded-down bed, a mahogany writing desk, and a window tightly sealed against the night. The lock on the door was intact, with no signs of tampering. A single sheet of paper, crumpled and partially torn, lay beneath the desk. Poirot retrieved it with a handkerchief, noting the faint traces of ink smudged, as if written in haste. The words were illegible, but a single initial, C, stood out in bold script. A letter, perhaps, Poirot mused, or a fragment of one. Could this be Mademoiselle Wren's missing letter, or something else entirely? He tucked the paper into his pocket, his mind racing. The scent he had noticed in Clara Wren's compartment, the sharp floral note lingered here too, faint but unmistakable. He leaned closer to the body, his nose wrinkling. Lavender, oui, but with a chemical edge. A perfume, perhaps, or something more sinister. Dr. Lucas Schmidt arrived, his spectacles fogged from his hurried pace, a medical bag in hand. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his German accent clipped. "This is dreadful. A murder, you say?" He knelt beside Stoll, his fingers probing the wound with professional detachment. A single blow to the temple, delivered with force. Death was likely, instantaneous, within the last few hours. The weapon, the letter opener, I presume. "Precisement," Poirot said, watching Schmidt closely. "You are familiar with such injuries?" Dr. Schmidt adjusted his spectacles, his expression guarded. "In my archaeological work, I have seen accidents. Blunt trauma is not uncommon in remote digs, but this is no accident." The corridor began to stir as passengers, roused by the commotion, gathered at the door. Baroness von Adler, her fur robe hastily thrown over a silk nightgown, gasped at the sight. Herr Stoll, dead. "This is outrageous. Are we all to be murdered in our beds?" "Madame, please," Poirot said, raising a hand. "There is no cause for alarm. Return to your compartments, all of you. I shall investigate this matter with the utmost care." Colonel Arbuthnot, his revolver once again in hand, pushed forward. "Investigate, Poirot. This is a damned mess. A man's been killed, and we're trapped on this train with a murderer." "Trapped, perhaps," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm, but not helpless. "The mind of Hercule Poirot is a weapon far sharper than any revolver. Now, Colonel, I ask that you lower your weapon. It does not inspire confidence." The colonel grunted but complied, while Janos Kovacs, lingering at the edge of the group, lit a cigarette, his eyes narrowing as he studied the scene. "A locked door, a dead man," he said softly. "Quite the puzzle, Monsieur Poirot. I trust you'll solve it before we reach Istanbul." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I have every intention, Monsieur Kovacs. But puzzles, they require precision." As the passengers were ushered back to their compartments, Poirot lingered, his eyes returning to the broken watch, the crumpled paper, and the faint scent of lavender. "A locked room," he murmured. "Yet no room is truly locked to a determined mind. The truth, it hides in the details, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it." He stepped into the corridor, closing the compartment door behind him. The train sped on, its rhythm unbroken, but the air was now thick with suspicion. The murder of Victor Stoll had transformed the Danube Express into a stage for a deadly drama, and Poirot knew the next act was only beginning. Chapter 5. Poirot's first observations. The Danube Express pressed onward through the grey dawn, its sleek carriages cutting through a landscape of rolling hills and mist-shrouded pines. Inside compartment 7, where the body of Victor Stoll lay, slumped, Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the chaos of murder. The air was heavy with the metallic temps of blood, and that persistent, sharp floral scent lavender, undercut by something chemical, like a perfume turned sour. Poirot's eyes, bright and unyielding, swept over the scene, cataloguing every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. "Monsieur Dubois," he said, addressing the conductor, who who hovered nervously at the door. "You will ensure that no one enters this compartment until I have completed my examination. The truth, it is delicate, and must not be disturbed by careless feet." "Oui, Monsieur Poirot," Dubois replied, his voice strained. "I have stationed a steward outside, and Dr. Schmidt has confirmed the time of death between midnight and 3 a.m., based on the body's condition." "Bon," Poirot said, nodding. "Now, leave me. The little grey cells, they require solitude to work their magic." As Dubois retreated, Poirot closed the door, sealing himself in with the dead man and the puzzle of his demise. He began with the body. Victor Stoll's hawkish features were frozen in a rictus of surprise, his lifeless eyes staring at the compartment's ceiling. The wound at his temple, a single, clean blow, had left a crimson stain on the velvet cushion. The silver letter opener, its filigree handle gleaming dully, lay on the floor, its blade crusted with dried blood. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the weapon but not touching it. "A letter opener," he murmured, "an instrument of correspondence turned to violence. Most poetic, yet most brutal." He examined Stahl's clothing suit, now rumpled, with a silk handkerchief protruding from the breast pocket. Poirot gently extracted it, noting a faint monogram. V's. Beneath the handkerchief, tucked into the pocket, was a small brass key, its surface scratched as if frequently used. A key, but to what? Poirot mused, slipping it into his own pocket with a handkerchief. A safe, a case, or perhaps a secret. The broken watch caught his attention next. Stopped at 2:17 a.m., its glass face shattered. It dangled from Stahl's waistcoat chain. Poirot tilted it to the light, noting the minute hand slightly bent. Was it broken in a struggle, or deliberately stopped to mislead? The time, it is a clue, a deception. He turned to the crumpled paper he had found beneath the desk, smoothing it carefully with his gloved hands. The ink was smudged, the words fragmented, but the bold initial C stood out, followed by a partial phrase. "Must know the truth." The paper was thick, expensive, with a faint watermark crest, perhaps, though too faint to decipher. "This letter," Poirot said softly, "it is no mere trifle. It connects, perhaps to Mademoiselle Wren's missing letter, or to another secret entirely." The compartment itself was a study in order, save for the violence that had disrupted it. The bed was folded down but unused, suggesting Stoll had not intended to sleep. The window was locked, its latch secure, ruling out entry from outside. The door's lock, too, showed no signs of tampering, its mechanism smooth and intact. Poirot tapped his cane against the floor, his mind racing. "A locked room," he said, "yet a murderer entered and left. How? The answer lies not in the lock, but in the method." That scent lavender with a chemical bite drew his attention again. He traced it to the cushion where Stahl's head rested, then to a small stain on the carpet near the door. Not a perfume alone, he thought, but something else. A sedative, perhaps, or a poison. He made a mental note to consult Dr. Schmidt further, though he suspected the archaeologist's knowledge extended beyond ancient artifacts. Stepping back, Poirot surveyed the room as a whole, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The clues, they speak," he murmured. "The letter opener, chosen for convenience or symbolism. The broken watch, marking a moment or obscuring it. The key, a promise of secrets yet to be unlocked. And the scent, a signature of the killer, perhaps, or a misdirection." A soft knock interrupted his reverie. Dr. Schmidt stood at the door, his spectacles reflecting the dim light. "Monsieur Poirot, I have completed a preliminary report. The wound was indeed fatal, caused by a single blow with considerable force. The letter opener penetrated deeply someone strong, or very determined." "Merci," Dr. Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And tell me, have you encountered this scent before? It is distinctive." Schmidt frowned, sniffing the air. "Lavender, yes, but there's something else. I can't place it. Perhaps a medical compound. I would need to test it." "Test it then," Poirot said, but discreetly. "We must not alarm the passengers further." As Schmidt departed, Poirot lingered, his gaze returning to the body. The murder of Victor Stoll was no random act. It was calculated, personal. The locked compartment suggested an impossible crime, yet Poirot knew that impossibility was merely a challenge to the intellect. "The killer," he thought, "is among us, hidden in plain sight, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall unmask them." He stepped into the corridor, where a small crowd had gathered despite Dubois's efforts. Baroness von Adler, her face pale beneath her powder, clutched her secretary's arm. "Monsieur Poirot, is it true? Herr Stoll murdered. This train is cursed." "Not cursed," Madame Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "Merely the stage for a human drama. Rest assured, I shall bring order to this chaos." Colonel Arbuthnot, standing nearby, snorted. "Older, with a killer loose, you'll need more than your famous methods, Poirot." "Methods," Colonel Poirot replied, his smile enigmatic, "are precisely what will prevail. Now, I must ask you all to remain calm. The truth, it will reveal itself in time." As the passengers dispersed, Poirot's mind churned. The broken watch, the key, the letter, the scent, they were threads in a tapestry, and he was determined to weave them together. The Danube Express, now a rolling crime scene, carried its secrets forward into the dawn, and Poirot knew the next hours would be critical. Chapter 6. Interrogations begin. The morning sun cast a pale golden light through the windows of the Danube Express, its rays fractured by the frost that clung to the glass. The train, now deep in the Hungarian plains, hummed with a deceptive calm, as if unaware of the dark deed committed within its elegant confines. In the lounge car, Hercule Poirot had commandeered a corner table, its polished surface covered with his notebook, a pencil, and a small cup of black coffee, its aroma sharp against the lingering tension in the air. The murder of Victor Stahl had transformed the journey, and Poirot, with his meticulous method, was determined to unravel the truth. "Monsieur Dubois," Poirot said, addressing the conductor, who stood nervously nearby, "you will bring the passengers to me, one by one. We shall conduct these interviews with order and discretion. The killer, they are among us, and the little grey cells, they will find them." "Oui," Monsieur Dubois replied, mopping his brow. "Shall I begin with the Baroness? She is most insistent on speaking with you." "Nan," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "We shall start with Mademoiselle Clara Wren. Her scream last night, her missing letter, these are threads that demand attention." Dubois nodded and hurried off, returning moments later with Clara Wren, her auburn hair pinned neatly but her face pale, her green eyes wary. She wore a simple wool dress, its modesty a stark contrast to the opulence of the train. She sat opposite Poirot, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mademoiselle Wren," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you are distressed, and not only by the death of Monsieur Stahl. Tell me, what was the nature of this letter you reported missing?" Clara's lips tightened, and she glanced at the window, where the passing landscape offered no escape. "It was personal, Monsieur Poirot, a letter from a friend, nothing more. I was upset when I couldn't find it, but it's unimportant now." "Unimportant?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Yet you were distressed enough to alert the conductor, and last night, your scream, it was no mere nightmare, I think. Did you know Monsieur Stahl?" Her eyes flicked to his, then away. "Only in passing. We spoke briefly in Vienna, at the station. He was polite, but reserved." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. "And where were you, mademoiselle, between midnight and 3 a.m., when Monsieur Stahl met his end?" "I was in my compartment," she said quickly, "asleep, until the nightmare woke me." "You heard it yourself?" "Oui," Poirot said. "But nightmares, they do not leave scuff marks on carpets, nor do they carry the scent of lavender and chemicals. You will forgive me, mademoiselle, but your alibi, it is convenient." Clara's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, rising abruptly. "I've told you all I know. May I go?" "For now," Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. "But the truth, it has a way of emerging." Next came Baroness Ilse von Adler, sweeping into the lounge car with the air of a monarch, her fur-trimmed coat draped over her shoulders. Her secretary, Heinrich, trailed behind, clutching a notebook. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her Viennese accent thick with indignation, "this is an outrage. A murder on this train, and I, a woman of my standing, forced to endure such suspicion." "Madame," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair, "your indignation is noted, but murder, it respects no rank. Tell me, what was your acquaintance with Monsieur Stahl?" The Baroness's eyes narrowed. "I knew him only by reputation, a merchant, dealing in antiques and rare goods. We met once, at a gala in Prague. He was ambitious, but coarse, and your whereabouts last night?" Poirot asked, his pencil poised. "In my compartment, of course," she snapped. Heinrich can confirm I retired after dinner, and did not leave until that dreadful scream woke me. Heinrich nodded vigorously. It is true, monsieur. The Baroness was in her compartment all night. Most interesting, Poirot said, his tone neutral. And this sapphire brooch you mentioned at dinner, stolen from your estate, did Monsieur Stahl, perhaps, have knowledge of such matters? The Baroness stiffened. If you suggest he was involved, I have no proof, but thieves are everywhere. Monsieur Poirot, even on this train. As she departed, Poirot made a note. Baroness defensive, protective of secrets. Heinrich's loyalty, too perfect. Colonel Arbuthnot was next, his military bearing undiminished by the early hour. He sat ramrod straight, his hands folded on the table. Poirot, he said gruffly, I've seen death before battlefields, not trains, but I'll answer your questions. Stahl was a stranger to me. Never met the man before this journey. And your movements last night? Poirot asked. Retired after dinner, read for an hour, then slept. My compartment's next to Kovacs. Him, if you like. No one came or went until that scream. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You are observant, Colonel. Did you notice anything unusual before the scream? A sound, perhaps, as Dr. Schmidt reported. Arbuthnot frowned. A thud, maybe. Around to a .m. Thought it was the train shifting. Didn't think much of it until now. Mercy, Colonel Poirot said, jotting a note. Thud at 2 a.m. consistent with Schmidt's account. Alibi relies on Kovacs. Janos Kovacs entered with his usual charm, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. Monsieur Poirot, you play the detective with such flair, he said, smirking. Stahl and I crossed paths in Budapest, once business matters, nothing more. Last night, I was in my compartment, enjoying a nightcap. Alone, alas. Alone, Poirot repeated. Yet the Colonel confirms your presence. And this business with Stahl, what was its nature? Kovacs's smile didn't waver. Imports, exports, dull stuff. He dealt in artifacts, I in diplomacy. Our paths barely touched. Poirot noted the evasion. Kovacs too smooth, too vague. Hides more than he reveals. Finally, Dr. Lucas Schmidt arrived, his spectacles polished, his manner composed. Monsieur Poirot, I've tested that scent you mentioned. It's lavender, mixed with a trace of ether unusual, possibly medicinal. Ether. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A sedative, perhaps. And your whereabouts, Doctor? In my compartment, reading, Schmidt said. I heard the thud, then the scream. I saw no one in the corridor until you appeared. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Each alibi, it is tidy, yet together, they form a puzzle. The killer, they are clever, but not cleverer than Hercule Poirot. As Schmidt left, Poirot stared at his notes. The broken watch, the key, the letter, the scent of ether, they pointed to a crime both planned and personal. The passengers, alibis, while plausible, were too perfect, like pieces forced into a frame. The Danube Express hurtled forward, carrying its secrets, and Poirot knew the next revelation was near. Chapter 7. The Baroness's secret. The Danube Express swayed gently through the Hungarian countryside, its wheels clattering over the tracks as the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rolling fields. In the lounge car, Hercule Poirot sat at his corner table, his coffee now cold, his notebook filled with precise, angular handwriting. The murder of Victor Stahl had woven a web of suspicion among the passengers, and Poirot's little grey cells were alight with the challenge of untangling it. The alibis, so neatly presented, were like a polished facade to perfect, hiding cracks that only a mind like his could uncover. He had requested a second audience with Baroness Ilsa von Adler, whose imperious demeanor and vague answers during their first interview had piqued his interest. As she entered the lounge car, her fur stole trailing like a royal train, Poirot rose, offering a courteous bow. Madame la Baronne, he said, his voice smooth but firm, I thank you for granting me this moment. There are matters concerning Monsieur Stahl that require clarification. The Baroness settled into the chair opposite, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier's light. Her secretary, Heinrich, hovered nearby, but she waved him away with a flick of her gloved hand. Heinrich, you will wait outside. This is a private conversation. The young man hesitated, then retreated, leaving them alone save for the soft clink of china from a steward clearing tables. Private, Madame Poirot said, his eyes sharp. Yet secrets, they have a way of becoming public, especially when murder is involved. Tell me, What was the true nature of your acquaintance with Monsieur Stahl? The Baroness's lips tightened, her emerald necklace glinting as she adjusted her posture. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, we met once, at a gala in Prague. He was a merchant, I, a patron of the arts. Our paths crossed briefly, nothing more. Poirot's mustache twitched. Briefly perhaps, but not without significance. You spoke of a stolen sapphire brooch at dinner, a loss that seemed to trouble you greatly. Was Monsieur Stahl, perhaps, connected to this theft? Her eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. You presume too much, monsieur. The brooch was stolen from my Viennese estate months ago. I mentioned it only to illustrate the of the police. If you suggest Stahl was a thief, I have no evidence. No evidence, Poirot said, leaning forward. Yet your reaction to his presence on this train was marked. When he entered the dining car, your smile faltered, and when his death was discovered, your indignation seemed tinged with fear. Why, Madame? The Baroness's fingers tightened on her handbag, the leather creaking faintly. Fear. You mistake me, Monsieur Poirot. I am outraged, not afraid. A murder on this train endangers us all. Precisement, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. And yet, I sense there is more. Allow me to propose a hypothesis. Monsieur Stahl, a merchant of antiques, dealt in items of great value, but items from your own collection. A sapphire brooch, for instance, or something even more precious. A secret, perhaps, that you would prefer to remain buried. Her face paled beneath its powder, but she recovered quickly, her laugh sharp and brittle. You weave a fine tale, monsieur, but it is pure fantasy. Stahl was nothing to me. If he dealt in stolen goods, it was his own affair. Poirot's eyes never left hers. And yet, madame, I found a key in Monsieur Stahl's pocket, a small brass key, scratched from frequent use. Might it belong to a safe in your possession, or perhaps to a case containing something you both valued? The Baroness's hand froze on her bag, and for a moment, the lounge car seemed to hold its breath. A key, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know nothing of any key. You are grasping at shadows, Monsieur Poirot. Shadows, oui, Poirot said, but shadows cast by the truth. One last question, madame. The scent of lavender and ether in Stahl's compartment, does it stir any memory? A perfume, perhaps, or a substance from your household? Her eyes widened, and she rose abruptly, her stole slipping to the floor. This interview is over, monsieur. I have nothing more to say. She swept toward the door, but paused, glancing back. Be careful, Monsieur Poirot. Curiosity can be dangerous. As she departed, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Dangerous indeed, he murmured, but it is the danger that sharpens the mind. He made a note in his book, Baroness evasive, fearful, knows more of Stahl than she admits. The key, a connection. The lounge car door slid open again, admitting Monsieur Dubois, his face flushed with urgency. Monsieur Poirot, a discovery. One of the stewards found this in the corridor near compartment 7. He held out a small silk handkerchief, its edge embroidered with a delicate IVA. Poirot's eyebrows rose. The Baroness's initials. Most interesting. Where exactly was it found? Just outside Stahl's compartment, Dubois said. It was caught in the carpet, near the door. Poirot examined the handkerchief, noting a faint stain lavender, with that same chemical undertone. Merci, Monsieur Dubois. This is a piece of the puzzle, though its place is not yet clear. Keep it safe, and speak of it to no one. As Dubois nodded and withdrew, Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the landscape blurred past. The Baroness's reaction, the handkerchief, the kithe, were threads in a tapestry growing ever more complex. Stahl's murder was no random act. It was rooted in a past that the Baroness, and perhaps others, were desperate to conceal. The scent of ether, the crumpled letter with its bold C. The broken watch stopped at 2:17 a.m. Arch, Clue whispered, of betrayal, and Poirot was determined to hear its full confession. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat. The Baroness hides a secret, he murmured, but she is not alone. The Danube Express carries many shadows, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall bring them to light. Chapter 8. The Diplomat's Deception. The Danube Express surged through the rugged beauty of the Carpathian foothills, its polished carriages gleaming under a sky heavy with gathering clouds. In the lounge car, Hercule Poirot sat at his corner table, his notebook open, his coffee replaced by a glass of mineral water, its bubbles catching the light of the chandelier above. The murder of Victor Stahl had cast a pall over the train, and the passengers, though outwardly composed, moved with the wariness of those who sensed a predator among them. Poirot, his little grey cells humming, was determined to uncover the truth, and his next subject was Janos Kovacs, the diplomat whose charm masked a troubling evasiveness. Monsieur Dubois, Poirot called to the conductor, who hovered near the bar, polishing glasses with unnecessary vigor. Please summon Monsieur Kovacs. I require a more thorough conversation. Oui, Monsieur Dubois replied, hurrying off with the air of a man eager to avoid the storm he sensed brewing. Moments later, Janos Kovacs entered, his silk tie impeccable, a cigarette case glinting in his hand. He slid into the chair opposite Poirot with the ease of a man accustomed to navigating tense rooms. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his Eastern European accent smooth as velvet. You summon me like a schoolboy to the headmaster's office. Surely I am not under suspicion. Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. Suspicion, Monsieur Kovacs, is a net cast wide until the truth is caught. You told me you knew Monsieur Stoll only in passing business in Budapest. You said, yet your manner suggests a deeper acquaintance. Shall we speak frankly? Kovacs lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his sharp features. Frankly, very well. Stahl was a merchant, I a diplomat. Our paths crossed in Budapest last year over a shipment of antiquities. He was persistent, shall we say, in his dealings, but that was the extent of it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Persistent, you say. Antiquities, were they, perhaps, of questionable provenance, items that might interest a baroness, or even a government? Kovacs exhaled a plume of smoke, his smile unwavering. You weave conspiracies, Monsieur Poirot. Stoll dealt in trinkets, vases, statues, nothing to concern a diplomat. As for governments, I am on holiday, not state business. Holiday, oui, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Yet I have learned, monsieur, that diplomats are never truly on holiday. Tell me, where were you between midnight and 3 a.m. when Monsieur Stahl was struck down? In my compartment, Kovacs said, tapping ash into a crystal tray. As I told you, enjoying a nightcap. Colonel Arbuthnot can confirm no one entered or left my compartment. He's a light sleeper, that one. Poirot's moustache twitched. The colonel, yes, a convenient witness. And yet, monsieur, I find your composure most intriguing. A man is murdered, a man you knew, and you remain as unruffled as this train's timetable. Kovacs's laugh was soft, almost mocking. I am a diplomat, Monsieur Poirot. Composure is my trade. If I were to panic at every crisis, I would be a poor servant of my country. Before Poirot could press further, Monsieur Dubois approached, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, forgive the interruption, but a steward found this in the waste bin, near the dining car. He held out a folded piece of paper, its edges creased and slightly scorched. It was hidden, as if someone meant to destroy it. Poirot unfolded the paper with care, revealing a series of numbers and letters in a precise and familiar script. 47B19X3K. Below it, a single word, Constantinople. A code, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. Or a telegram, perhaps. Monsieur Kovacs, does this mean anything to you? Kovacs's smile faltered, though only for a moment. A cipher. I'm afraid I'm no cryptographer, monsieur. It could be anything. A train schedule. A private note. You'd do better too. Ask Dr. Schmidt. He's the scholar. Perhaps, Poirot said, tucking the paper into his notebook. But I find it curious, monsieur, that a diplomat claims ignorance of codes. They are, after all, the currency of your profession. Kovacs rose, crushing his cigarette in the tray. You are persistent, Monsieur Poirot, but you chase shadows. I have nothing to hide. He inclined his head and left his stride too deliberate, as if masking unease. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Shadows, oui, but shadows with form. The telegram, it points to Constantinople, destination, and perhaps Kovacs's true purpose. He made a note. Kovacs evasive, possibly involved in Stahl's business. Coded telegram suggests espionage or illicit trade. That as he sipped his mineral water, Clara ran past the lounge car window, her face drawn, her eyes darting toward the corridor. Poirot's gaze followed her, noting the nervous twist of her hands. Mademoiselle Wren, too, carries a burden, he thought. The letter, the scream, the scent of ethereal connected. But how? The train's whistle sounded, a mournful cry as it approached a tunnel, plunging the carriage into momentary Darkness. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The broken watch at 2:17 a.m., the brass key, the crumpled letter with its bold C, the Baroness's handkerchief, and now this coded telegram. Each clue was a thread, and Kovacs's smooth denials only tightened the weave. He summoned Dubois. Monsieur, you will inquire among the stewards discreetly whether Monsieur Kovacs was seen leaving his compartment last night. And this telegram, it must be kept secure. It is a key, perhaps, to more than we yet understand. As Dubois nodded and departed, Poirot's gaze drifted to the passing landscape, now emerging from the tunnel's shadow. The murder of Victor Stahl was no mere crime of passion. It hinted at a larger game, one of secrets and stakes that reached beyond the train. The diplomat, Poirot murmured. He plays a part, but it is not the lead. The truth, it lies in the connections, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall find them. Chapter 9. A pianist's Past the Danube Express carved its way through the Carpathian Mountains, its polished carriages swaying gently as the afternoon sun cast dappled light through the windows. In the lounge car, Hercule Poirot sat at his accustomed table, his notebook open, his pen poised like a conductor's baton. The murder of Victor Stahl had tightened the atmosphere aboard the train, and the passengers, though maintaining a veneer of civility, exchanged glances laced with suspicion. Poirot, his little grey cells attuned to every nuance, had turned his attention to Clara Wren, the auburn-haired pianist whose scream had pierced the night and whose missing letter hinted at secrets yet to be unveiled. Monsieur Dubois, Poirot called to the conductor, who lingered near the bar, his face etched with the strain of the past hours. Please fetch Mademoiselle Wren. It is time we discuss matters more openly. Oui, Monsieur Dubois replied, hurrying off with the weary gait of a man caught in a storm not of his making. Clara Wren entered moments later, her green eyes wary, her hands clasped tightly before her. She wore a simple but elegant grey dress, its severity softened by a silk scarf pinned with a small pearl brooch. She sat opposite Poirot, her posture rigid, as if bracing for an assault. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low, I've told you all I know. Why must you summon me again? Poirot's smile was gentle but unyielding. Mademoiselle, the truth, it is like a melody beautiful when complete, but discordant when notes are missing. Your scream, your missing letter, your unease at Monsieur Stahl's presence, these are notes that do not yet harmonize. Let us play the tune together. We. Clara's fingers tightened on her scarf, her knuckles whitening. I've said it, was a nightmare. The letter was personal, unimportant. As for Herstall, I barely knew him, barely. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Yet you spoke with him in Vienna, at the station, and your reaction to his arrival in the dining car was one of alarm. Allow me to propose a hypothesis. Mademoiselle, you and Monsieur Stahl shared a history, a scandal. Perhaps, from your days in Paris, where you performed for audiences of great renown. Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she masked it. You're mistaken, monsieur. My life in Paris was unremarkable. Concerts, recitals, nothing more. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. Unremarkable, you say, yet I have learned, through discreet inquiries, that you were once celebrated as Clara the Enchantress, a pianist whose performances drew the elite of Europe. But there was a scandal, a performance cancelled abruptly, whispers of an affair, a disappearance from the public eye, and Monsieur Stahl, a merchant of antiquities, was he not in Paris at that time? Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. She glanced toward the window, where the mountains loomed like silent judges. You've been digging into my past, she said finally, her voice trembling. Yes, there was a scandal, a misunderstanding. A nobleman made advances, and when I refused, he spread lies. My career suffered, but Stahl, he had nothing to do with it, nothing. Poirot's moustache twitched. Yet I found a letter in his compartment, crumpled, with a bold C, and the words must know the truth. Was this your letter, mademoiselle? A plea, a threat, a confession? Clara's hands flew to her face, covering her mouth. No, I told you, my letter was stolen. It was from a friend, not about Stahl. You're twisting things. Twisting, Nan, Poirot said, his eyes piercing. I seek only to straighten the threads. Tell me, mademoiselle, where were you at 2:17 a.m., when Stahl's watch stopped, marking his death? I was in my compartment, she said, her voice rising. Asleep, until the nightmare woke me. I swear it. And the scent of lavender and ether, Poirot pressed. The same scent in your compartment and stalls. Is it your perfume, mademoiselle, or something more medicinal? Clara's face paled, and she rose, her scarf slipping to the floor. I don't use lavender, she said sharply. And I know nothing of ether. You're accusing me of something I didn't do. Accusing? None, Poirot said, retrieving her scarf and handing it to her. Merely observing. But the truth, mademoiselle, it will not remain hidden. If you know more, it is best to speak now. She clutched the scarf, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I've told you everything. Leave me alone. She turned and fled the lounge car, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. Poirot leaned back, making a note. Clara Wren scandal in Paris. Possible link to Stahl. Denies letter. Sent. Fearful, but truthful. He sipped his mineral water, his mind racing. The scandal, the letter, the scent. They pointed to a connection between Clara and Stahl. But the nature of it remained elusive. The lounge car door opened again, admitting Dr. Lucas Schmidt, his spectacles glinting as he approached. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his German accent clipped. I've analyzed the ether trace further. It's a medical compound, likely used as a sedative. I found traces on the Baroness's handkerchief as well. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, Dr. Rin. Where might one obtain such a substance on this train? Schmidt hesitated. The train's medical kit might contain it, but access is restricted to the conductor and myself. I checked. The kit is untouched. Untouched, you say, Poirot murmured. Yet the scent persists. Mercy, Doctor. Your expertise is invaluable. As Schmidt departed, Poirot's gaze drifted to the passing mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist. Clara Wren's passed. The Baroness's handkerchief, Kovacs's coded telegram, the brass key in Stahl's pocket-hitch clue was a note in a discordant symphony, and Poirot was determined to find the melody. The Danube Express carried its secrets onward, and the truth, he knew, was drawing closer with every mile. Chapter 10. The trains delay. The Danube Express, a marvel of engineering and elegance, had been gliding through the Carpathian Mountains with the precision of a Swiss watch. But as dusk settled over the rugged peaks, a jarring lurch disrupted its rhythm, followed by a grinding screech that sent a shiver through the carriages. The train slowed, then stopped altogether, stranded in a remote pass where snow dusted the pines and the wind howled like a restless spirit. Inside the lounge car, Hercule Poirot sat at his corner table, his notebook open, his eyes narrowed as he absorbed the sudden stillness. The murder of Victor Stahl had already cast a shadow over the journey, and this delay, Poirot sensed, was no mere inconvenience. It was a stage for the next act of the drama. Passengers gathered in the lounge, their faces a mix of irritation and unease. Baroness Ilse von Adler, her fur stole draped dramatically over her shoulders, stood near the bar, her voice sharp as she addressed the conductor. Monsieur Dubois, this is intolerable, she declared, her Viennese accent cutting through the murmurs. A train of this caliber, stranded like a common freight car. What is the meaning of this? Dubois, his face flushed with perspiration despite the chill seeping through the windows, wrung his hands. Madame, it is a mechanical fault or problem with the engine's coupling, the engineer says. We are working to resolve it, but it may take several hours. Hours. Colonel Arbuthnot barked, his military moustache bristling. We're sitting ducks in this god-forsaken pass, with a murderer on board, no less. Poirot, who had been listening silently, raised a hand. Calm yourself, Colonel. The delay, it is an inconvenience. But also an opportunity. The killer cannot flee, and the truth, it cannot hide forever. His voice was steady, but his eyes scanned the room, noting the passengers' reactions. Clara Wren sat alone near a window, her auburn hair catching the fading light, her hands twisting a silk scarf. Janos Kovacs leaned against the bar, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers, his smile as enigmatic as ever. Dr. Lucas Schmidt, his spectacles fogged from the cold, pored over a notebook, though his glances toward Clara betrayed his distraction. The American couple, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, huddled together, their usual exuberance subdued, while the Baroness's secretary, Heinrich, stood dutifully at her side, his expression unreadable. Poirot rose, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice commanding attention. This delay, it grants us time to reflect. A man is dead, and the clues they speak to those who listen. I ask that you remain vigilant and report anything unusual to me." Mrs. Thornton, her blonde curls slightly askew, clutched her husband's arm. "Unusual, Monsieur Poirot. Everything about this trip is unusual. First that scream, then poor hairstyle, and now we're stuck in the middle of nowhere." "Precisement," Poirot said, his mustache twitching. "And in such isolation, secrets grow restless. They emerge, like shadows in the snow." As the passengers dispersed, some to their compartments, others to linger in the lounge, Poirot approached Dubois. "Monsieur, tell me more of this mechanical fault. Is it common for such a train to falter?" Dubois shook his head. "Nan, monsieur. The Danube Express is meticulously maintained. The engineer suspects sabotage a loosened bolt in the coupling mechanism. It could have been deliberate." "Sabotage?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And who has access to the engine?" "Only the crew, monsieur the engineer and his assistant. But the train was unattended briefly in Vienna before departure." Poirot made a mental note. Sabotage, possible diversion or delay tactic. Killer's work. He thanked Dubois and stepped to the window, gazing at the snow-dusted pass. The isolation of the train, hemmed in by mountains, was both a challenge and an advantage. The killer was trapped, but so were the clues, waiting to be uncovered. He returned to his notebook, reviewing the evidence. The broken watch stopped at 2:17 a.m., the brass key in Stahl's pocket, the crumpled letter with its bold C, the Baroness's handkerchief stained with lavender and ether, the coded telegram found near the dining car. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Clara's scandal, the Baroness's secrecy, Kovacs's evasions, all pointed to a motive rooted in a shared past, perhaps tied to Stahl's dealings in antiquities. A soft cough interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Schmidt stood nearby, his notebook clutched to his chest. "Monsieur Poirot, a word. I've been thinking about the ether trace. It's not just a sedative. It could be used to incapacitate someone briefly, without leaving a strong trace. If Stahl was drugged before the blow." Poirot's eyebrows rose. A most astute observation. "Dr. Renoir, might such a substance be obtained, if not from the train's medical kit?" Schmidt hesitated. "It's not uncommon in archaeological work. Ether is used to preserve certain artifacts, to prevent decay. Stahl, as a merchant of antiquities, might have carried it, or someone else," Poirot said, his voice low. "Mercy, doctor. Your insight is valuable." As Schmidt retreated, Poirot's gaze fell on Clara Wren, still seated by the window. Her scarf lay on the table, and he noticed a faint tear in its hem, as if caught on something sharp. "Mademoiselle Wren," he thought, "you are a melody, of contradictions fearful, yet defiant. What do you hide?" The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the lounge car grew colder. Poirot pulled his coat tighter, his mind racing. The delay, the sabotage, the ether all suggested a killer who was not only cunning but desperate to control the pace of the investigation. "The Danube Express," he murmured. "It is a stage, and the players, they are restless. But I, Hercule Poirot, shall direct the final act." Chapter 11. The second crime. The Danube Express stood motionless in the snowy Carpathian Pass, its once proud rhythm silenced by the mechanical fault that had stranded it amid the whispering pines. Night had fallen, cloaking the mountains in darkness, and the lounge car, lit by the soft glow of chandeliers, was a haven of warmth against the biting cold outside. Yet the air within was thick with fear. The murder of Victor Stahl casting a shadow that no amount of crystal or velvet could dispel. Hercule Poirot, seated at his corner table, his notebook filled with meticulous notes, sipped a tisane, his eyes scanning the passengers who lingered in uneasy clusters. The delay had stretched into hours, and the passengers' nerves were fraying. Baroness Ilse von Adler, her emerald necklace glinting, murmured complaints to her secretary, Heinrich, who nodded dutifully. Colonel Arbuthnot stood by the bar, his glass of whiskey untouched, his gaze fixed on the snow beyond the windows. Janos Kovacs, ever the diplomat, engaged Mr. and Mrs. Thornton in light conversation, though his eyes darted toward Clara Wren, who sat alone, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of tea. Dr. Lucas Schmidt, his spectacles reflecting the light, scribbled in his notebook, his absorption a stark contrast to the tension around him. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, weaving together the threads of the case. The broken watch stopped at 2:17 a.m., The brass key in Stoll's pocket, the crumpled letter with its bold C, the Baroness's handkerchief stained with lavender and ether, the coded telegram pointing to Constantinople, and Clara's scandalous past. The sabotage of the train, he suspected, was no accident but a deliberate act to delay the investigation. The killer, he murmured, is not content to wait. They act, even now. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, choking gasp. From across the lounge, Clara Wren's cup clattered to the table, her hands flying to her throat as she staggered to her feet, her face pale and contorted. "Help," she gasped, her voice hoarse. "I can't breathe." The room erupted into chaos. Mrs. Thornton screamed, her husband catching her as she swayed. Colonel Arbuthnot lunged forward, knocking over a chair, while Kovacs dropped his cigarette, his composure shattered. Dr. Schmidt, quickest to react, rushed to Clara's side, easing her to the floor as she gasped for air. "Poison," Schmidt barked, his medical training taking over. Her symptoms cyanosis, labored breathing suggests a toxic substance. "Someone fetch water, quickly." Poirot was at Clara's side in an instant, his calm demeanor a beacon amid the panic. "Doctor, what is the nature of this poison?" he asked, his eyes scanning Clara's face, her lips faintly blue. Schmidt, loosening Clara's collar, shook his head. "It's too early to say without tests, but it resembles cyanide or a similar compound. She's still conscious, which is a good sign. We must dilute the poison." He gestured to Dubois, who arrived with a glass of water, his hands trembling. As Schmidt administered the water, coaxing Clara to drink, Poirot's gaze fell on her overturned cup. A faint residue clung to the rim, and that familiar scent lavender and ether wafted faintly from the spilled tea. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the same scent as in Stoll's compartment. This is no coincidence." Clara's breathing steadied, though her eyes remained wide with terror. I didn't see," she whispered. "The tea, it was brought to me. I thought it was safe." Poirot turned to Dubois, his voice sharp. "Who served Mademoiselle Wren this tea?" Dubois paled. "One of the stewards, monsieur, I believe. He has been with the train for years. Beyond reproach." "Beyond reproach," perhaps Poirot said, but not beyond question. "Fetch him at once." As Dubois hurried off, Poirot examined the cup, careful not to touch it directly. The residue was subtle, a fine powder barely visible. Ether, perhaps, to mask the poison's taste, he thought. The killer grows bold, striking in full view. The passengers, now gathered in a tense circle, whispered among themselves. The Baroness, her face ashen, clutched Heinrich's arm. "This is madness," she said. "First Stoll, now this. Are we all to be poisoned?" "Calm yourself, madame," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Panic serves only the guilty. Mademoiselle Wren is alive, and we shall ensure she remains so." Colonel Arbuthnot's hand hovered near his revolver. "Poirot, this is getting out of hand. A murderer and now a poisoner. We need to search every compartment, root this devil out." "Search," Poirot said, "but with method, not madness. The clues, they are here, in this very room." His eyes flicked to Kovacs, who had regained his composure but stood apart, watching Clara with an unreadable expression. Pierre, the steward, arrived, his young face pale with fear. "Monsieur Poirot, I swear, I only poured the tea from the pot in the galley. I didn't add anything." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And who had access to this pot, Monsieur Pierre?" "Anyone, I suppose," Pierre stammered. "The galley is open to the stewards, and passengers pass through to the dining car." "Merci," Poirot said, dismissing him. He turned to Schmidt, who was monitoring Clara's pulse. "Doctor, her condition?" "Stable, for now," Schmidt said. "The dose was small, likely not lethal, but she needs rest and observation. I'll take her to my compartment. Tit has medical supplies." As Schmidt helped Clara to her feet, supported by Mrs. Thornton, Poirot's mind raced. The poison, the ether, the timing, it was a deliberate escalation, meant to silence or warn. "Mademoiselle Wren," he thought, "you know something, or the killer believes you do." "But what?" He addressed the passengers, his voice steady. "Return to your compartments, but remain vigilant. The killer is among us, and they grow desperate. I, Hercule Poirot, shall not rest until they are unmasked." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the spilled tea, the scent of ether lingering like a ghost. The second crime had raised the stakes, and the clues, the key, the letter, the telegram. The handkerchief were converging toward a truth that was both intricate and deadly. The Danube Express, stranded in the snow, was a crucible, and Poirot knew the fire of revelation was near. Chapter 12. The little grey cells at work for Danube Express remained motionless in the snowy Carpathian Pass, its sleek carriages encased in a silence broken only by the mournful howl of the wind outside. The chandeliers in the lounge car cast a soft glow over the polished mahogany, but the warmth of the setting could not dispel the chill of fear that gripped the passengers. The murder of Victor Stahl and the near-fatal poisoning of Clara Wren had transformed the train into a gilded cage, and Hercule Poirot, seated at his corner table, was its relentless inquisitor. His notebook lay open, its pages dense with precise handwriting, and his eyes, bright with the fire of deduction, stared into the middle distance as his little grey cells wove the threads of the case into a coherent tapestry. Poirot sipped a fresh tisane, the steam curling upward like a question mark. The clues, accumulated over the past days, danced in his mind. The broken watch stopped at 2:17 a.m. The brass key found in Stahl's pocket. The crumpled letter with its bold C and partial phrase, "Must know the truth." The handkerchief stained with lavender and ether. The coded telegram pointing to Constantinople. Clara's scandalous past. The sabotaged engine. And the poisoned tea. Each was a fragment, but together they hinted at a motive far deeper than a simple crime of passion. He began with the watch, its shattered face a silent witness to the moment of death. 2:17 a.m., he murmured, a precise time, yet possibly a deception. Was it broken in a struggle, or stopped deliberately to mislead? The watch's bent minute hand suggested force, but its precision troubled him. A killer meticulous enough to strike with a single blow might also manipulate time to obscure their actions. The brass key, small and scratched, was another enigma. Poirot turned it over in his gloved hand, its weight light, but its significance heavy. A key to what? A safe, a case, a locked drawer. Stahl, a merchant of antiquities, dealt in valuables, and the Baroness's mention of a stolen sapphire brooch lingered in Poirot's mind. Could the key unlock a hidden cache? Perhaps one tied to the Baroness's wealth or Stahl's illicit trade. The crumpled letter, with its bold C, was a tantalizing clue. C for Clara. Poirot wondered. Her missing letter, her distress, her scream all pointed to a connection with Stahl. The phrase "must know the truth" suggested a revelation. Perhaps one Stahl held over her, tied to her Paris scandal. Yet the letter's expensive paper and faint watermarker crest, possibly aristocratic, hinted at another player. Perhaps the Baroness herself. The handkerchief, embroidered with IVA, was a damning link to Baroness von Adler. Its stain of lavender and ether matched the scent in Stahl's compartment and Clara's poisoned tea. Ether, Poirot mused. A sedative, a preservative, or a mask for poison. The Baroness denies its use, yet her fear betrays her. Her evasive answers about Stahl and her stolen brooch suggested a deeper involvement. Perhaps a theft gone wrong, or a betrayal rooted in greed. The coded telegram, found scorched in the dining car, pointed to Constantinople, Stahl's destination, and Kovacs's supposed holiday. Its cryptic numbers and letters 47B, 19X3K suggested espionage or an illicit deal. Kovacs's smooth denials only heightened Poirot's suspicion. A diplomat, he thought, whose composure hides. A purpose was Stahl, a partner, a rival, or a threat. The sabotage of the train's engine, a loosened bolt, was no accident. It was a calculated act to delay the journey, to keep the killer's secrets confined within the train's walls. The killer fears exposure, Poirot reasoned, or seeks time to strike again. As with Mademoiselle Wren's poisoning, the use of ether in both crimes was no coincidence. It was a signature, deliberate or careless, linking the murder to the attempted murder. Clara's scandal in Paris and noblemen's advances, lies spread, a career derailed offered a motive. If Stahl was involved, Poirot thought, he may have blackmailed her, threatening to expose her past. Yet her fear seemed genuine, her poisoning a sign she was a target, not a perpetrator. The C on the letter could be hers, but it could also point to another, perhaps Colonel Arbuthnot, whose military precision matched the killer's methodical strike. Poirot's mind turned to the passengers' alibis, each too tidy, like a rehearsed performance. The Baroness, confirmed by Heinrich, claimed to be in her compartment. Kovacs, vouched for by Arbuthnot, was drinking alone. Arbuthnot heard a thud but saw nothing. Schmidt, reading, noted the same thud. Clara, awake with a nightmare, was alone. All accounted for, Poirot murmured, yet one lies, or more. The scent of lavender and ether was the thread that bound the crimes. Dr. Schmidt's analysis ether, as a sedative or preservative, suggested a killer, with access to medical or archaeological supplies. Stahl, as a merchant, might have carried it, but so might Schmidt, whose work involved artifacts. The Baroness, with her wealth, could procure such substances, and Kovacs, with his diplomatic connections, had access to discreet channels. Poirot closed his notebook, his fingers steepled. "The motive," he said softly. "It is betrayal, laced with greed. Stahl, a man of secrets, crossed someone, perhaps all. A stolen treasure, a blackmail scheme, an international plot. The pieces were aligning, forming a pattern of deception that spanned Vienna to Constantinople. The killer had struck to silence Stahl, and now Clara. But their desperation betrayed them. He rose, his cane tapping the floor. The train's delay had given him time, and the clues were converging toward a truth both intricate and inevitable. "The stage is set," he murmured, "and the players, they await their cue. Tomorrow, in the lounge car, I, Hercule Poirot, shall unveil the truth." Outside, the snow fell thicker, blanketing the pass in silence. The Danube Express, a prisoner of the mountains, held its secrets close, but Poirot's mind was a lantern, illuminating the shadows. The final act was near, and the killer, he knew, could not escape the light of his deduction. Chapter 13. The gathering in the lounge car. The Danube Express remained trapped in the snowy Carpathian Pass, its gleaming carriages a stark contrast to the bleak, frost-laden pines outside. The lounge car, bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, was a stage set for revelation, its polished mahogany tables and velvet upholstery lending an air of grandeur to the grim proceedings. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure commanding attention, his waxed moustache gleaming as he surveyed the assembled passengers. The murder of Victor Stahl and the poisoning of Clara Wren had woven a web of suspicion, and now, with the train still stranded, Poirot was ready to cut through the lies. The passengers sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of apprehension and defiance. Baroness Ilse von Adler, her emerald necklace glinting, gripped her secretary Heinrich's arm. Colonel Arbuthnot, his military bearing rigid, stood near the bar, his hand hovering near his revolver. Janos Kovacs, the diplomat, leaned against a pillar, a cigarette unlit between his fingers, his eyes sharp with calculation. Clara Wren, pale but composed after her brush with poison, sat with her hands clasped, her scarf draped loosely around her shoulders. Dr. Lucas Schmidt, his spectacles polished, clutched his notebook, his expression guarded. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, the American couple, huddled together, their usual exuberance replaced by nervous glances. Monsieur Dubois, the conductor, stood at the door, his face etched with exhaustion. "Mesdames et Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. "We are gathered here to resolve a most heinous crime, the murder of Victor Stahl, and the attempted murder of Mademoiselle Clara Wren. The Danube Express. It is a stage, and you, its players, have each played a part. But one among you has played the role of murderer." A murmur rippled through the group, quickly silenced as Poirot raised a hand. "Let us review the facts, with the clarity of the little grey cells. Monsieur Stahl was found in a locked compartment, struck down by a silver letter opener at 2:17 a.m., as his broken watch attests. A brass key, a crumpled letter with the initial C, a handkerchief stained with lavender and ether, a coded telegram, a sabotaged engine, and a poisoned cup of teethies are the threads of our tapestry. And now, I shall weave them together." He turned to Clara Wren, his eyes gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle Wren, your scream awoke the train, and your missing letter set this mystery in motion. You claimed it was a personal note, yet I found a fragment in Stahl's compartment, marked with a C, and the words, 'Must know the truth.' You spoke of a scandal in Paris, a nobleman's lies that ruined your career. Was Stahl part of that past?" Clara's lips trembled, but she shook her head. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I told you, I barely knew him. Yet you were poisoned," Poirot said, "with a substance laced with ether, the same scent in Stahl's compartment. Someone wished to silence you. Why?" He pivoted to the Baroness, whose face paled beneath her powder. Madame la Baronne, your handkerchief, marked IVA, was found near Stahl's compartment, stained with lavender and ether. You spoke of a stolen sapphire brooch, and your fear of Stahl was evident. Was he, perhaps, a thief in your employ who betrayed you? The Baroness's voice was icy. Absurd. I had no dealings with that man beyond a passing acquaintance. Poirot's gaze shifted to Kovacs. Monsieur Kovacs, your coded telegram, found scorched, points to Constantinople Stahl's destination. You claim diplomacy, yet your evasions suggest espionage or illicit trade. Did Stahl threaten your plans? Kovacs's smile was thin. You chase phantoms, Poirot. I'm a diplomat, not a spy. Poirot turned to Schmidt. Doctor, your knowledge of ether, used in your archaeological work, is curious. You reported a thud before Clara's scream, and your composure is remarkable. Schmidt adjusted his spectacles. I am a scientist, monsieur, I observe. I do not act. Finally, Poirot addressed the group as a whole. Each of you has an alibi, yet the truth lies in the contradictions. The watch, stopped at 2:17, was a lie. The blow was struck earlier. The watch broken to mislead. The key in Stahl's pocket unlocked a case, not on this train, but in Constantinople, containing stolen antiquities. The letter, with its C, was not Clara's, but a code for Constantinople, part of a deal Stahl brokered. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. But the true twist lies in the motive. Stahl was no mere merchant, he was a blackmailer. He held secrets over each of you. Clara's scandal, the Baroness's stolen jewels, Kovacs's espionage, Schmidt's forged artifacts. But the killer was not one of you alone. A gasp rose from the group. Poirot's voice grew softer, yet more commanding. The killer is Heinrich, the Baroness's secretary. He acted on her orders, but with his own purpose. The Baroness, desperate to recover her stolen brooch, hired Stahl to retrieve it, but he betrayed her, demanding payment to keep silent. Heinrich, loyal but ambitious, saw an opportunity. He struck Stahl with the letter opener, using ether to subdue him, leaving the Baroness's handkerchief to implicate her. The poisoned tea was meant to silence Clara, who had seen Heinrich near Stahl's compartment that night. Heinrich's face drained of color, his hands shaking. Lies. I was with the Baroness all night. The Baroness gasped, her hand flying to her necklace. Heinrich, you betrayed me. Poirot raised a hand. The ether, Heinrich, was your mistake. You used it to clean artifacts for Stahl, a trick you learned from Schmidt. The telegram, which you tried to destroy, was Stahl's communication with his buyers, intercepted by Kovacs. The sabotage delayed the train, giving you time to cover your tracks. But the little grey cells, they see all. Heinrich lunged for the door, but Arbuthnot seized him, his military strength unyielding. You're not going anywhere, lad, he growled. Poirot's smile was serene. The truth, it is revealed. Heinrich acted for greed, hoping to claim Stahl's profits for himself. The Baroness, though complicit, was not the hand that struck. As Dubois summoned the stewards to restrain Heinrich, the passengers sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation settling over them. The Danube Express, still stranded, was no longer a cage of secrets. It was a stage where justice had taken center. Chapter 14. The Resolution, the lounge car of the Danube Express, was bathed in the pale light of dawn, the snow outside reflecting a soft glow through the frosted windows. The air, heavy with the weight of Hercule Poirot's revelation, seemed to hum with a quiet finality. Heinrich, the Baroness's secretary, stood restrained by two stewards, his face a mask of defiance and despair, his wrists bound by a makeshift cord. The passengers, seated in their semicircle, were silent, their eyes shifting between Poirot, Heinrich, and the Baroness, whose regal composure had crumbled into a stunned pallor. The murder of Victor Stahl and the poisoning of Clara Wren had been laid bare, and now Poirot would bring the curtain down on the drama. Madame et Messieurs, Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. The truth has been unveiled, but the tapestry of this crime requires a final stitch. Heinrich, driven by greed and ambition, struck down Monsieur Stahl and attempted to silence Mademoiselle Wren. Yet there are questions that linger, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall answer them, so that justice may be served. He turned to Heinrich, whose eyes burned with resentment. Monsieur Heinrich, you were the Baroness's loyal servant, but also her pawn. You used ether, learned from Dr. Schmidt's archaeological methods, to subdue Stahl before striking him with the letter opener. weapon taken from the Baroness's own desk, perhaps to cast suspicion on her. Heinrich's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence a confession in itself. Poirot continued, addressing the Baroness. Madame la Baronne, you hired Stahl to recover your stolen sapphire brooch, believing him a discreet ally, but he betrayed you, demanding payment to keep silent about your involvement in an illicit trade in antiquities that funded your lavish lifestyle. You ordered Heinrich to deal with him, but you did not foresee his ambition. He saw a chance to claim Stahl's profits for himself, and so he killed him. The Baroness clutched her emerald necklace, her voice trembling. I never intended murder, Monsieur Poirot. I only wanted my property returned. Heinrich acted alone in the act. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes piercing, but your secret set the stage. The handkerchief, stained with lavender and ether, was yours, dropped carelessly by Heinrich to implicate you, should suspicion fall on him. He turned to Clara Wren, whose pale face had regained some color. Mademoiselle Wren, your scream and your missing letter were the sparks that lit this mystery. The letter, marked with a C, was not yours, but a note Stahl intended for Constantinople, part of his blackmail scheme. You saw Heinrich near Stahl's compartment that night, did you not? And so, he poisoned your tea, hoping to silence you before you could speak. Clara nodded, her voice barely audible. I didn't understand at first. I saw him in the corridor, near the time of the scream. I thought it was nothing. But then the tea. Precisement, Poirot said. The ether, used to mask the poison, linked the crimes. Dr. Schmidt, your expertise confirmed its presence, though you, too, had secrets. Your work with forged artifacts intersected with Stahl's dealings, did it not? Schmidt adjusted his spectacles, his expression guarded. I consulted on certain pieces, yes, but I am no murderer. No, Poirot agreed, but your silence protected your reputation. And you, Monsieur Kovacs, he said, turning to the diplomat, your coded telegram revealed Stahl's plans in Constantinople, a deal you sought to control. You played no part in the murder, but your evasions clouded the truth. Kovacs lit a cigarette, his smile faint. A diplomat's prerogative, Monsieur Poirot. I protect my interests. Poirot's gaze swept the room. And you, Colonel Arbuthnot, your military precision noted the thud before the scream, a clue that fixed the time of death earlier than the broken watch suggested. The watch, stopped at 2:17 a.m., was a deception by Heinrich to confuse the timeline. He paused, his fingers steepled. The brass key in Stahl's pocket unlocked a case in Constantinople, where he hid his ill-gotten gains. The sabotage of the engine was Heinrich's final act, delaying the train to cover his tracks. But the little grey cells, they see through such tricks. Monsieur Dubois, standing at the door, spoke up, his voice trembling. Monsieur Poirot, what is to be done? We are still stranded, and the authorities are hours away. Poirot nodded. Heinrich will be confined until we reach the next station, where the police will take him. The Baroness, though complicit, did not strike the blow, and her punishment will be the loss of her reputation. The rest of you are free, but not without guilt. Secrets, they breed betrayal, and betrayal, it breeds death. As the stewards led Heinrich away, the passengers sat in silence, the weight of their own secrets pressing down. Clara rose, her scarf clutched tightly. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I feared I would be next. Poirot bowed slightly. Mademoiselle, fear no more. The truth, it is your shield. The Baroness stood, her face drawn. You have ruined me, Poirot, she said, her voice low. But perhaps it is justice. Colonel Arbuthnot clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder. Damned fine work. Man, didn't think you'd pull it off. Poirot's smile was modest. The little grey cells, Colonel, they do not fail. As the passengers dispersed, the lounge car emptying, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the snow outside. The train's engine, now under repair, would soon resume its journey, carrying them to Istanbul. The cloister key, the letter, the handkerchief, the telegram had formed a pattern, and Heinrich's greed had been his undoing. Yet Poirot felt a pang of melancholy, for the human heart, so full of ambition and deceit, was a puzzle never fully solved. He closed his notebook, his work complete. Justice, he murmured, it is a fragile thing, but it endures. The Danube Express, soon to move again, would carry its passengers forward. but the shadow of this journey would linger in their souls.